Good Thursday afternoon. Thanks for joining us on Kare 11 News Now. I'm Chris Harapsky. We are live at our nation's capital with breaking news this afternoon. The U.S. Senate has voted to allow mining near the boundary waters in northern Minnesota. The vote was split along party lines. The vote overturns a 20-year ban on copper-nickel mining in the Rainy River watershed. So that was imposed by the Biden administration. Mining in the boundary waters is illegal, still illegal, but this decision will allow companies to pursue mining in the watershed that sort of flows into the boundary waters. The Chilean mining company Antofagasta and its subsidiary Twin Metals Minnesota will have to submit a new mine plan to state and federal environmental authorities showing how they would prevent pollution from getting into the boundary waters. Those for mining in the area say it will increase jobs and provide critical minerals like copper, nickel, and cobalt into the economy. Those against it say mining there will inevitably pollute the pristine boundary waters and benefit a foreign company.
Today in the United States Senate, the Senate took action that flies in the face of that balance. We overturned a public land order put in place legally that had been in place for 3 years that would have stopped copper sulfide mining on the doorstep of the boundary waters. And in so doing, it puts this incredibly precious and sacred place at risk for pollution.
In a statement on X, Representative Pete Stauber, who authored the bill, celebrated its passing, saying that mining is our past, our present, and our future. Also new this afternoon, 2 assault charges are filed for an ICE agent and a warrant issued for his arrest stemming from an incident that took place on Highway 62 back in February. According to the criminal complaint, in February, ICE agent Gregory Morgan Jr. was illegally passing rush hour traffic on the shoulder of Highway 62 and the 35W interchange by Portland Avenue there. Another driver partially moved into the shoulder to block him. We've all seen this happen. And Morgan, the ICE agent, allegedly rolled down his window and pointed his pistol with a red light laser sight at both the people that were in the car. The complaint says Morgan's vehicle was unmarked with Utah plates, and the victims in this case had no idea that he was law enforcement.
Mr. Morgan sped up to pull alongside the victim's vehicle. Mr. Morgan then visibly slowed his vehicle to match the pace of the victim's vehicle, opened his window, and pointed his duty weapon directly at both victims in the other vehicle while continuing to drive illegally on the shoulder.
The charges come with a nationwide warrant, which means that the agent will be arrested and extradited back to Hennepin County to face these charges. This is the first state prosecution of any federal agent from Operation Metro Surge. Developing right now, President Trump says Israel and Lebanon have agreed to a 10-day ceasefire as the two countries try to work out a peace deal alongside a peace deal between the U.S. and Iran. Iran had been pushing for a ceasefire with Israel in Lebanon as well. But Israeli leaders were adamant that a pause in fighting in Lebanon would not be part of a deal between the U.S. and Iran. Right now, the White House says that it's confident it can work out a peace deal with Iran. The administration is ramping up pressure, though, on the Iranian economy, stopping Iranian ships from exporting oil through the Strait of Hormuz.
Threatening to shoot missiles and drones at ships, commercial ships that are lawfully transiting international waters, that is not control. That's piracy. That's terrorism. The United States Navy controls the traffic going in and out of the strait because we have real assets and real capabilities.
A horrific story today out of Virginia. The former lieutenant governor, Justin Fairfax, and his wife are dead after an apparent murder-suicide. According to police, Fairfax shot his wife, then turned the gun on himself overnight. Fairfax County Police Chief Kevin Davis says that the couple's teenage children were home at the time and that their son was the one who called 911. The incident, according to investigators, appears to stem from a messy divorce that the couple was going through. In Wisconsin, Governor Tony Evers declaring a state of emergency following severe weather over the last few days there. Take a look at this new video of flooded streets. That's in Milwaukee. Latest round of thunderstorms dumping up to 3 inches of rain last night. Major roads were shut down for hours. Authorities urging drivers to stay off those roads, let the crews manage the flooding there. Wow. Flooding also impacted Brewers fans last night. The roof at American Family Field leaking water as fans tried to enjoy the game. But things, well, they got worse as fans left the stadium. You can see that they were forced to walk through the water-covered streets there to get to their cars. Cars attempted to drive through all that, ended up getting stranded in those pools there. With about 1 month left in the legislative session, the financial crisis involving HCMC is now one of the top issues at the Capitol. Lawmakers continue talking about ways to save the facility as they hear more pleas from faith groups and from hospital leaders. Here's Danny Spiewak.
At the Capitol, pressure is building to save HCMC.
We could lose the largest public hospital in the state of Minnesota.
Reverend Oscar Sinclair and other clergy members met with lawmakers Wednesday, urging them to find a fix for a facility that treats a large share of low-income patients.
To be clear, this is a policy crisis and it is a moral crisis about how we care for our neighbors.
HCMC projects $1.7 billion in losses over the next decade due to a combination of factors, including the rise in patients without insurance and federal changes to Medicaid through the One Big Beautiful Bill. To offset some of those losses, lawmakers have proposed remaking a Hennepin County sales tax that originally paid for construction of Target Field into a tax, raising millions for HCMC and other struggling hospitals like North Memorial. House members have proposed raising the current 0.15% tax to 1%. Meanwhile, the Senate has proposed a more modest increase to 0.25%, led by DFL Taxes Chair Ann Rest.
What is the fair share of the poor?
In her committee Wednesday, Rest expressed some discomfort in hiking sales taxes on customers to pay for hospitals. But she says the sales tax can be one tool to raise revenue for health care, along with other state funding.
I do believe, and I'm committed to making sure that we are able to do that we can send HCMC and every other healthcare institution on the proper road of stabilization.
The loss of HCMC in downtown Minneapolis could also deal a devastating blow to the regional economy. The Minneapolis Downtown Council calls this a top priority, while the Minnesota Chamber of Commerce is also watching closely.
Does the chamber have a stance on helping the hospital?
That is going to be a key ingredient to the end of session, we think.
Chamber of Commerce President Doug Loon says his organization supports a legislative fix of some kind, although it hasn't taken a stance on the sales tax issue.
We want to make sure that something meaningful is done there that helps create the momentum for a successful completion to this session. But I'll say this about our entire hospital system. They're under a great amount of financial stress right now.
Now that the sales tax bills for HCMC have come up in the Senate and the House, there's going to be significant negotiation across chambers to figure out the final numbers and come to a version that both chambers can support. They have to finish this by the end of the legislative session on May 18th. At the Capitol, I'm Danny Spiewak, Kare 11 News.
Lawmakers face a deadline this Friday to pass funding bills out of committee, and it appears that the hospital funding bill has already made that deadline. Today, we're getting our first-hand look at what changes could be coming to Grand Casino Arena. This is in St. Paul. St. Paul's mayor and the Minnesota Wild unveiling new renderings for the $600 million renovation. We know funding is mainly coming from the city and the team. St. Paul will extend the half-cent sales tax, but won't raise property taxes, they say. As for the changes, officials say they want to add more locker rooms and facilities for artists and concerts in the event level. A lot of the work would happen on the north side of the building. That's near 5th Street. At a time when our cell phones are constantly tracked by big tech, the Minnesota Supreme Court is setting some ground rules around how much they share with Big Brother. In a ruling this week, the court said the state constitution ensures a reasonable amount of privacy around our location data, and it's leaving at least one murder conviction in limbo. Here's Kent Erdahl.
After the body of a man was discovered in rural Dakota County 5 years ago, investigators obtained a geofence warrant for cell phones that passed through this remote area. But the Minnesota Supreme Court now says investigators took that warrant a step too far.
The court recognized that we are entitled to privacy in our location information, even if we share our location information with a provider like Google.
Jennifer Lynch is general counsel for the Electronic Frontier Foundation, which appealed the second-degree murder conviction of Ivan Contreras Sanchez, arguing that investigators violated his right to privacy when they tracked his location data beyond that original scene.
It was incredibly important that the court in this case recognized that access to that information requires a warrant.
There's so much new technology that can be used to track our citizens, and so we need to put some guardrails on that. And I see the court doing that under the Minnesota Constitution, which is great.
St. Thomas law professor Julie Jonas says she's surprised by the timing of the decision, considering the United States Supreme Court is set to hear a similar case later this month.
The court could go another way at the federal level and say, because you voluntarily give this information over to Google, you don't have a reasonable expectation of privacy, and cut it off right there.
By electing not to wait, the Minnesota Supreme Court now sends this case back to the appeals court.
He could get a new trial.
So the question then is, could old cases resurface?
I don't see this decision as being retroactive, so I don't think it's going to open up a whole lot of cases on this issue.
In regards to future cases, she points to the ruling where the court made a point to say geofence warrants are a useful tool for law enforcement, adding, had there been judicial review of the reasonableness of that expanded search, the result here may have been different.
In a way, does this ruling give law enforcement more of a rule book for how to go about this?
I think it does. It says you can do this, but you need to have everything very carefully tailored as you go forward.
Kent Erdahl reporting there. He says that Ivan Contreras Sanchez is currently serving a 40-year sentence for second-degree murder and initially confessed to taking part in that murder during questioning, but he later challenged the way that he was identified as a suspect using that cell phone data. Now the Court of Appeals will have to decide if that mistake by law enforcement qualifies as a good faith exception or if he will receive a new trial. Without that evidence, that is central to the case. Stick with us. We got more news and weather coming up after the break.